The Waves, published in 1931, is usually considered Woolf's most experimental fiction. It comes right at the end of the period of High Modernism, which saw such experiments as James Joyce's Ulysses and T.S. Eliot's The Waste Land. Of course, we know from our study this semester that Woolf also spent the 1920s experimenting in all kinds of ways, always searching for new ways to define consciousness or to compose a narrative. The Waves takes Woolf's previous experiments and moves them up a notch. Pause the video now and answer the 3 questions on the slide. What can you say about Woolf's narrative strategies in The Waves based on your answers to these questions? What do you make of Woolf's use of those italicized interludes to structure the novel? The basic story of The Waves concerns a group of 6 friends, following them from nursery school age to adulthood. When you compare this text to other Woolf texts, you may be shocked at the tiny, short paragraphs at the beginning of the book, which is told entirely in dialogue. The narrator helpfully tells us who is speaking each time. Remember that if a paragraph ends without quotation marks, the previous speaker is still speaking. So if you get confused about who is speaking, just go back to the last time a paragraph ends in quotation marks. The speaker of your passage should be referenced near the beginning of the next paragraph. You'll find that as the kids grow up, their diction and the complexity of their statements will become more sophisticated. This is a book that explores how our childhood experiences affect who we become. So pay attention to what happens to the characters as they grow. Even small, apparently insignificant things may matter greatly to one of them. Thinking back to Moments of Being, where Woolf talked about the shocks that periodically penetrate the cotton wool of life, some of the small epiphanies a character experiences that to others are completely forgettable can be lifelong revelations of the truth behind the cotton wool of life. Thinking chronologically, The Waves follows To the Lighthouse, which was challenging for Woolf to write because of her illnesses, and Orlando, which was fun and a romp. As she is beginning to think about and draft The Waves, Woolf is writing On Being Ill, which is published in 1930. This idea is at the heart of Swiderski's essay that you are reading to accompany The Waves. Make sure you read The Waves first, then Swiderski, so that you can be aware of other examples of how The Waves draws on from On Being Ill. If you've read both texts already, pause now and write down some examples from Swiderski that Swiderski does not include, but that you think show Woolf in the same frame of mind as when she wrote On Being Ill. Now, as we approach the end of the semester and the construction of your essays and final presentations, it's a good time to look forward and try to make other connections between the texts we've been reading. How would you say The Waves relates to Jacob's Room? What interests and strategies does Woolf carry over from that early book? What does she bring to this discussion that is new? Pause the video for a moment and write down your responses so you have access to them later. Now ask yourself the same questions about Mrs. Dalloway. Again, pause for a moment to write down your responses. Can you do the same thing for To the Lighthouse? That book and The Waves are very close together in time of composition. What is Woolf doing in The Waves that she wasn't doing in To the Lighthouse? What concerns still keep her interest? What strategies remain the same? And finally, and maybe most challengingly, what connections can you make between Orlando and The Waves? Clearly, the style and narrative strategies are quite different. Can you find any interests that Woolf explores in both texts? What vision of the world is she presenting in these 2 texts? Now take your insights from this video to the discussion. This week will be much more open-ended than our usual practice. I want you to use your thoughts from this video to frame a statement about not only The Waves, but also how Virginia Woolf's fiction has changed over the course of this most productive decade for her.